In this video, we'll be discussing hurt, what hurt is, why it happens, and how to overcome it using excerpts from Krishnamurti. This video extends upon K's talks by clarifying some of the points he raised, and the unique feature of this channel is that we provide simple diagrams that explain his concepts so you can understand him more easily. So let's jump in to the first video.
I think it would be worthwhile if we could discuss the nature of hurt. Why human beings are hurt. All people are hurt.
You mean both the physical and the psychological?
Psychological, especially.
Especially the psychological level, yes. Mm-hmm.
Physically, we can tolerate it.
Yes.
We can bear up with a pain and say, well, I won't let it interfere with my thinking. I won't let it corrode my psychological quality of mind. I can watch over it. Mind can watch over that. But the psychological hurts are much more important and difficult to grapple with and understand.
Yes, yes.
Throughout our lives, we experience two forms of hurt: physical hurt and psychological hurt. Physical hurt arises from injury due to accident, illness, or attack, and psychological hurt arises from injury due to insult or failure. The consequences of hurt are very destructive. Hurt can establish fears that restrict our lives or create divisions between ourselves and others that result in perpetual conflict. As we grow up, we accumulate more hurts, find new ways to suffer, and watch ourselves withdraw from the world. Seeing ourselves caught in this process produces an intense realization of its danger. Our response to that danger requires us to understand hurt and find out if it is possible to free ourselves from it. Physical hurt is easy to understand. Something happens, the body gets injured, and we feel pain. The origin of the hurt is the accident, illness, or attack, and the thing that gets hurt is the body. The solution to physical hurt is also fairly simple. Avoid people who want to attack you, be healthy to avoid illness, and establish systems that avoid accidents. Psychological hurt, however, is much more elusive. We see the source of hurt, the insult that gets thrown at us, and we see the pain we feel after we have been insulted. But the thing that gets hurt is not clear. In the case of physical hurt, it's the body that gets hurt. But in the case of psychological hurt, the body is unharmed. So what is it that gets hurt?
What is the thing that is hurt? We said that physical hurt is not the same as psychological hurt. So we are dealing with psychological hurt. What is the thing that is hurt?
To understand this, we'll use an example of two people, a dancer and a guitarist, and explore how an insult affects them differently. Someone says to the guitarist, "You are a terrible guitarist," and he gets hurt. Someone then says to the dancer, "You are a terrible guitarist," and she does not get hurt. Someone then says to the dancer, "You are a terrible dancer," and she does get hurt. Someone then says to the guitarist, "You are a terrible dancer," and he does not get hurt. As we can see, the guitarist is affected by a comment about guitar, but not about dancing, and the dancer is affected by a comment about dancing, but not about guitar. So, why is there this difference? What we notice is that for an insult to produce hurt, the insult must have a relationship to us. The guitarist has a relationship to guitar, but not dancing. The dancer has a relationship to dancing, but not to guitar. The relationship they have with the activity is responsible for the hurt. But the relationship alone does not explain hurt in its entirety. This is because it is through that same relationship that you can be complimented instead of insulted and feel flattery instead of hurt.
Hurt also, which is the other side, is flattery. Both are the same.
Flattery is the opposite of hurt, and it works in exactly the same way. Someone says to the guitarist, "You are a great guitarist," and he feels flattered. Someone says to the dancer, "You are a great guitarist," and she does not get flattered. The difference between hurt and flattery is found in the terms great and terrible. Great is a compliment that produces flattery. Terrible is an insult that produces hurt. We relate ourselves to an activity through a process of self-identification. A person identifies themselves with guitar and in their mind becomes a guitarist. A person identifies themselves with dancing and in their minds becomes a dancer. The identification is established through the image we build about ourselves. The guitarist has an image of himself as a guitarist. The dancer has an image of herself as a dancer. The self-identification creates a feeling of security. The degree of security we feel is in part determined by the skill we believe ourselves to have. A compliment or insult affects this feeling of security. A compliment validates or increases the level of security we feel. This produces a feeling of pleasure, which we call flattery. An insult invalidates or decreases the level of security we feel. This produces a feeling of pain, which we call hurt. Therefore, the thing that gets hurt is the image we have built about ourselves.
Who is hurt? The image that I have about myself is hurt. I think I'm a marvelous man. You come along, tell me, don't be silly. That hurts me because I have an image about myself as being marvelous, clever, intelligent, bright, and all the rest of that rubbish. And you come along and say, for goodness sake, what an ass you are. The image which I have created about myself is hurt.
The guitarist can be hurt by the statement, "You are a terrible guitarist," because he has an image of himself as a guitarist. The dancer can be hurt by the statement, "You are a terrible dancer," because she has an image of herself as a dancer. This shows us that there is an inevitable reaction of hurt when we have an image about ourselves, and no reaction of hurt when we do not have an image about ourselves. Seeing the image to be the root of hurt, the mind explores if it can end hurt by cutting the thing at its root, ending the image of myself. The mind asks, is it possible to have no image of myself? Can I live that way? The answer to this question is no. This is because some images about myself are necessary and have a practical significance in life. The image of my name enables me to be easily identified by friends or organisations when I'm booking a room at a hotel or applying for a passport. The image of my profession enables me to take the lead role when certain situations arise, and the image I have of my body enables me to identify myself in the mirror. So, the fact is, I must have an image about myself. Knowing that I must have an image about myself, and knowing that images about myself produce hurt, I question whether it is possible to only have a very basic image of myself. The thinking here is that if I have 100 images of myself, I have 100 opportunities to be hurt. Whereas if I can reduce that number to, let's say, 10, then I only have 10 opportunities to be hurt. Of course, that wouldn't end hurt, but if this is possible, it would be moving in the right direction, so it's something to explore. So, I inquire into whether I can only have a very basic image of myself. And yet again, I find out the answer to be no. I cannot maintain a basic image of myself, nor is it practical to do so. This is because learning is automatic. The moment I see something, that thing is recorded into the brain and learnt about. By observing a person, I learn about them. By observing a skill, I learn how to do it. And by observing myself, I learn about myself. I do not choose to learn. It happens naturally through observation. The seeing is the recording. As I go through life, I have many experiences. Those experiences are recorded and I learn about myself. Anything that I learn about myself becomes an image of myself. As I have experiences in a particular direction, the image I build about myself becomes very complex. For example, I learn I like fruit. Then I learn I like bananas. Then I learn I like bananas most when they start to develop little brown dots on them. The same process takes place in relation to everything: music, movies, people, and so on. This learning is absolutely necessary and entirely practical. It would make no sense to not memorize the types of food you like. Have you put olives in your sandwich every day when you know you don't like olives? It would make no sense to not memorize the types of social events you like. Go to a nightclub every weekend when you're the type of person who would prefer a book club. So naturally, as you go through life, you will build an immense image of yourself. The image you build of yourself has many benefits. So the image must be allowed to expand in both number and complexity infinitely. That will inevitably happen whether you like it or not. So, reducing the image of myself to something basic is neither possible nor practical. And so, hurt cannot be handled that way. So, to gather up everything we know so far, the image of myself is the root of hurt. I must have an image of myself, and that image will inevitably expand as I live and learn more about myself. What I know from this is that the ending of hurt is not possible by ending the image of myself, nor is it possible by reducing the size of the image of myself. Knowing that images must remain, I ask myself, is it possible to have an image without that image causing hurt? When I consider this, I acknowledge that I have many images that don't cause hurt. I have an image of this chair. I have an image of this table. I have an image of this laptop. Neither of those images create hurt. Why? I realise that the image of the chair is not the image of myself. The image of the table is not the image of myself, nor is the image of the laptop the image of myself. But now that I've seen that images don't necessarily have to create hurt, I have the question, is there an image of myself that is not capable of creating hurt? What I mean by this is there two fundamentally different types of images about myself? One type of image that is capable of being hurt, and another type of image that is incapable of being hurt. And, in extension to this, if that is possible, is it possible for me to live my life only with the images about myself that are incapable of being hurt, and not have any images about myself that are capable of being hurt? Is that possible? If this is possible, the mind would be free from hurt. So, is this possible? The answer to this question is yes, and the comprehension of this is the beginning of the ending of her, which we will now explain. So, I ask myself, do I have an image about myself that is not capable of being her? I realise that I do. My name. My name is Robert, and I'm 37 years old, and in 37 years, that name has never hurt me.
Doesn't this raise the question of name, the use of name?
Name, form.
The child is given a name. The child identifies himself with a name.
Yes, I can identify, the child can identify itself, but just a name. Brown. Mr. Brown. There is nothing to it.
So, it is possible to have an image about myself and that image not create hurt. So, why do some images about myself create hurt while others do not? How do I find this out? Well, if I can find two images that are almost identical, and one image is capable of creating hurt and the other is not, then I can inspect the differences between them and find out the factor that makes hurt possible. Let me explain this by giving a personal example. In the past, I worked in IT. I have this image. I have 11 years IT experience. That is an image of myself. That image is factual. I do have 11 years IT experience. That image is practical. I can put it on a job application. That image is void of emotion. When that image comes to mind, I feel nothing. That image is incapable of being hurt. That is a type A image of myself, an emotionless image of myself. Now, there is another type of image about myself, a type B image, an emotional image about myself. I create the image I am a great IT technician. That is an image about myself. That image is not factual, it is speculative. That image is not practical. That image of myself does not help me fix any problems, and it puts me in competition with other people who have IT knowledge when there needn't be any competition. Also, that image is not void of emotion. That image is full of emotion. When that image is surging through my mind, I feel pleasure, I feel secure, I feel something. That image is capable of being hurt. That is a type B image about myself, an emotional image about myself. The type A image, the emotionless image of myself, I have 11 years IT experience, is created for the purpose of accurately representing reality. That image is entirely practical and incapable of being hurt. The type B image, the emotional image of myself, I am a great IT technician, is not created for the purpose of accurately representing reality. It is created for the purpose of making me feel pleasure. That image is entirely impractical and capable of being hurt. The purpose of the type B image, the emotional image, is to distort reality. The reality is that I feel inadequate in myself, but when the image I am a great IT technician comes to mind, I feel secure. That imagination is recorded into memory, and the brain stores an image that contains pleasure. The pleasure that is imbued into that image is the factor that creates pain when we are insulted. The pleasure we feel is directly related to the security we feel. The greater the pleasure, the greater the feeling of security. Therefore, the more security I derive from that image, the more hurt I will feel when that image gets contradicted. And the more violently I will defend that image to retain the security it makes me feel. Why do we create fanciful images about ourselves? We do this to escape from the insecurity we feel. We use the imagination of pleasure to escape from the reality of pain. You can think of a pleasant self-image like a bandage. You feel pain, you apply the bandage, and you feel better. Then someone comes along and rips off the bandage, you feel pain, and that exposes the underlying insecurity you were trying to cover up. So, hurt arises from the fanciful images about ourselves, and fanciful images arise because we feel insecure. The creation of fanciful images is our current approach to alleviating the insecurity we feel. The issue with this approach is that pleasurable images do not solve the underlying insecurity we feel. They only create a pretense of security that calms the mind in the present moment. The pleasurable images establish beliefs about ourselves that can be contradicted and cause us pain. In this way, we trade a calm mind in the present for a disturbed mind in the future. Those images then begin to create their own forms of insecurity, which adds to and masks the underlying insecurity we feel. The pleasurable images present themselves as solutions to the insecurity, but actually perpetuate the insecurity itself. This causes the mind to build emotional images of itself under the guise of solving the problem, while failing to realize that by doing so, it is actually building the problem. And that is self-deception. So, how do we approach the problem of hurt and the insecurity that underlies it?
There are two questions involved. Can the hurts be healed so that not a mark is left? And can future hurts be prevented completely, not without any resistance? You follow? Those are two problems.
The problem that faces us has several parts. Problem 1, the mind is conditioned to create pleasurable images about itself and establish new ways the mind can be hurt. So this process must come to an end. Problem 2 is that the mind has created pleasurable images about itself in the past, which it believes in, holds on to, and can be hurt by. So these images must be nullified. Problem 3 is the insecurity that lies at the base of all this, so that must be remedied. So, problem 1. How do we handle the mind creating pleasurable images about itself? The solution to this problem is observation. When an image comes to mind, you can do one of two things. You can neglect it or observe it. Observation and neglect result in two entirely different experiences. To explain this point, we first have to have a basic understanding of how the imagination works. First, an image comes to mind. That image is then experienced. The experience determines whether that image continues or stops. That experience is recorded into memory. The observation of an image or the neglect of an image change how the image is experienced. Take the example of neglect first. A fanciful image of myself comes to mind. I neglect to observe that image, so that image is experienced as real and true. The imagination yields pleasure and continues. The imagination is recorded into memory as real and true. That memory establishes the basis to be hurt or flattered in the future. Now, take the same situation, but this time one gives their attention to the image and observes it. A fanciful image of myself comes to mind. When I observe that image, it is experienced as imaginary and false. The imagination loses its vitality. The imagination is recorded into memory as imaginary and false. The falseness of that memory means that that memory is not capable of hurt or flattery in the future. The observation of the imagination reveals that it is imaginary and not real, and that changes everything.
The negation is to deny what is false, not knowing what is true.
Yes.
To see the false in the false, and to see the truth in the false. And it is the truth that denies the false. You don't deny the false, but you see what is false. And the very seeing of what is false is the truth. I give my attention to it. Then there is no registration taking place. You understand this? It is only when there is inattention the registration of hurt takes place, or flattery.
The requirement to be free from the accumulation of fanciful images about ourselves is to observe those images as they appear in the mind. The observation of the image devitalizes the image in the present moment. The falseness derived from that observation is recorded into memory. That quality of falseness prevents the image being reactive in the future and thus not capable of hurt or flattery. That stops the mind accumulating new hurts, and that solves problem 1.
Can you end that hurt completely, totally wipe it out, without leaving a mark? You can, can't you? If you pay attention to the wound, know what has caused it, and the wound is the image you have about yourself that has been wounded, and end that image that is wounded. You can do that if you've gone into it very, very deeply.
Now, problem 2. Throughout the past, the mind has built hundreds of fanciful images about itself. Those images exist in memory and react automatically with hurt when we are insulted. Those images distort how I think about the world, how I see the world, and how I behave in the world. How can those images be nullified so the mind is liberated from the capacity to be hurt by them? We'll demonstrate this through an example. An image comes to mind, an image of me as a great man. Yesterday, a fanciful image came to mind of me as a ladies' man, and a week earlier there was an image of me as a tough guy. Each time a fanciful image appears, the object is different. Great man, ladies' man, tough guy. While the object of the fanciful image changes, all fanciful images operate from the same underlying process. Observation is not limited to observing one particular fanciful image. It is capable of observing the whole process. That process underlies the creation of all new fanciful images and the maintenance of all past fanciful images. Through observation of the process, the mind is able to falsify the process. The comprehension of the falseness of the process causes everything built on top of it to crumble. As such, all fanciful images built in the past become nullified. The observation of the process is the sweeping of the past. That solves problem 2.
The past hurts have gone in that attention, which is attention is like a flame that burns out the past and present hurt.
Now for problem 3. The mind is now in a state where the solace it found in fantasy is no longer possible. So the mind is left to remain with the fact that it is insecure. The mind has comprehended what fake security is, but not yet comprehended what real security is. I do not want to be insecure, so I must find out if there is anything in this life capable of bringing real security. If such a thing exists, I can throw all my energy into that. To comprehend real security, I must first understand insecurity. We saw the operation of insecurity through the fanciful imaginations the mind built about itself. When the mind creates and believes in fanciful images about itself, it arises the capacity to be hurt. The capacity to be hurt is a form of insecurity. When insulted, the mind becomes hurt, and that hurt results in hatred, anger, and violence. Anger, hatred, and violence establish further insecurity in ourselves and are expressed outside of us to create insecurity throughout society. When we get hurt, we hurt others. When the mind observes hurt and inquires into it as we are doing, it begins to comprehend hurt. The comprehension of hurt alleviates the mind's capacity to be hurt. That alleviates, in part, the mind's capacity to be insecure. As the capacity to be hurt decreases, so too does the mind's capacity to hurt others. And that alleviates the mind's capacity to create insecurity throughout society. That means as the mind begins to comprehend itself, it begins to alleviate the insecurity inside itself and cease to create insecurity throughout society. The comprehension of oneself is the ending of insecurity. That means the comprehension of oneself is real security. The comprehension of ourselves comes through the observation of ourselves. So observation is the means of establishing real security. Once the seed of observation has been planted, the activity of real security has been awakened. While the mind may not initially acknowledge observation to be real security, it nevertheless intuits an immense value in its activity. The mind will then naturally turn its gaze to every aspect of our conditioning and, through doing so, comprehend the falseness of it and begin to dismantle the insecure architecture the mind has built. The secure mind will then express itself and inevitably establish a secure society.
So you have to ask, what is society? Right? Is society different from me? Or I am society? I don't know if you follow this. I am society. I've created the awful thing. I'm part of it. Society is not different from me. Right? So I don't reform the outer circle. Social reform, all the political game that's going on. First, I put my house in order. My house. Deeply my house in order. And then there'd be order out there. If you and I and all of us who are listening put our house first in order, we have created a new society.
Thank you very much for watching. If you would like to see more talks on Krishnamurti subjects, head over to the YouTube channel. And if you're interested in reading some of the books I've written, head over to the website. Have a very nice day, and I'll see you on the next video.